Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another edition of the Too Tall Sports Podcast. Today's episode, you're going to hear from Bridget Case. She's a journalist, reporter, anchor on TV. She's covered all kinds of high school, pro, college sports, and she's a podcaster also. And you can find her at After Orange Slices. She's been a big help to me. I wanted to bring her on the show and kind of ask her about her journey. She was a cheerleader at Oregon, wanted to hear about that experience, and also an NFL cheerleader with the San Diego Chargers at the time. And now she's a podcaster and journalist. Great interview. I think you guys are going to love it. You can also always follow me at Too Tall Sports Podcast on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. Just type in Too Tall Sports Podcast. YouTube, you can see me there. And also iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever you want to find me. That's where I'll be. Too Tall Sports Podcast. Got another great interview for you. Let's get it. All right, welcome back to the Too Tall Sports Podcast. My name is Brett Lauren, the host. You can find me on social media at Too Tall Sports Podcast and on Apple and YouTube and everywhere. And I have a very special guest today. Her name is Bridget Case. She is the host of After Orange Slices, which is a podcast, and she also co-hosts Turbo Talk with Robert Turbin, former Super Bowl champion. And she's also a journalist, a reporter, and a former Charger cheerleader as well. So she's very accomplished. And glad to have you on the show today. How you doing, Bridget?
Oh my gosh. Thanks, Brett, for having me. I'm so pumped to be here and be one of your earliest guests. I feel so special.
I do too. I'm lucky to get someone of your caliber, you know?
That's stretching it, but I'll take it.
So I found Bridget, just a little background on social media. She's got a huge following. She always gets great guests. So she's given me a lot of tips, over the last few months that I've been doing this. So just by watching her and how she runs her business. So I want to kind of bring her on and get her story. I guess let's start kind of a mini background, where you're from and how you got your start in sports.
Yeah. So, gosh, I don't really know where to start. I start this story differently every time I tell it. That I need to get this streamlined. Let's just start with that. But okay, for me, like my background as far as just being the biggest sports fan in the world, I'm sure you're the same way, just started with my family. Like, gosh, as early as I can remember, we had this morning routine with my dad and my brother and I. There's this little bagel shop in Irvine we would go to in the mornings, really early in the mornings, like 5 a.m., it's like dewy outside. And my dad would wrap us up in blankets on Saturday mornings, and we would go get coffee and bagels. And I'd get this like creamy bagel sandwich that had avocado on it. Anyway, I just like have this amazing childhood memory of this bagel sandwich.
It's important, right? Yeah.
It is. It totally is. It sets the scene. Yeah. So then we would go home, we'd sit on the couch, and we would watch college football all day long. We'd start with College Game Day, for a couple hours, and we would just watch football all day. And that was our thing. We had season tickets to UCLA football games and basketball games, but seriously, like those earliest memories of just being on the couch and being just immersed in, I guess, like family sports culture, like having college football on in the background, that's just the normal like noise that you're used to, instead of just hearing mom's voice in the kitchen. Like that's what you're used to. That's the happy childhood memories, right? So I always knew that I wanted to be involved in sports, and I would always go up to the TV as a really little kid and point at the TV and be like, that's what I want to do. And so when I was about in third grade in elementary school, at some point, I decided that I wanted to start a newspaper. Mind you, I was the only person who wrote for the newspaper, but it was a great newspaper. Nobody read it. I thought it was fantastic.
Okay.
But I loved recess. I loved playing at lunch, but a lot of times nobody wanted to play kickball. I loved kickball. Okay, and then the tetherball line was too long. I just didn't want to sit there waiting. I wanted to use my time wisely. So I figured, okay, I'll cover sports on the playground. And everybody wanted to play tag. I did not want to play tag because I thought that makes me look stupid as a girl if you're chasing after boys. Who wants to look like that? It's just so funny that oh my God, I was just such an idiot. But I would go around and interview my classmates about playing tag. And I would ask the girls, why do you like going and chasing boys? And I would, ask the guys, like, why do you play tag? My questions were hilarious.
Right.
And my headline was just so simple. It was like, why boys and girls like to chase each other and play tag. And that was my first sport that I covered. And
you were born to be a journalist.
I was. And it wasn't the most successful newspaper in the world, but it was something. It was a start. And so I always knew that I wanted to cover sports. I didn't know in what capacity. I didn't know if that meant print or broadcasting, but I have background in both. I wrote for SB Nation while I was in Washington, and got to cover WNBA, got to cover women's college basketball, and like my passion definitely lies in writing. And working in small markets as a sports anchor has been such a blessing, because you get to write, you get to produce, you get to be on air, you get to do it all. And so I think what's so important for me to always tell people is, listen, like, just because you see somebody talking on air about sports doesn't mean they're just all of a sudden getting out there and being thrown a script and just reading something, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. And that's what I love. So I've always decided I want the grind. I want the grit that has gotten me there. And like the jobs that I've had along the way have just been wild, but so worth it, and have, gotten me here. And I never thought that all of a sudden I would be pushing for digital journalism, but that's the future of media now. I'm sure I mean, you're an athlete, and I'm sure that you saw, just as a former baseball player, that, like, sports in your classic TV networks is dying. Your local sports gone. The only reason we still care about it is all for those small markets covering high school sports. And like, when you grow up in LA or Orange County, bigger places, nobody cares about high school sports except for like maybe one CIF game like a year. It's just, so that was funny to me when I like was thrown into the loop of covering high school sports, because I was like, people care about this, just because like,
California
when I was
is
growing
kind
up,
of different than Texas, where
nobody cares about
yeah.
Exactly, nobody cares. It was the funniest thing. It was just wild, because where I was working in Washington, that's all they knew. It was like Texas. It was like everyone came out for Friday nights. That was the town thing.
Right.
But it was so cool to see that. So I've had all these fantastic experiences, and I know that's like a very roundabout way of not really answering your question, but no, I just love telling that, because it's made me love what I do even more, because I have so much of an appreciation of sports culture in general at every single level. Like, I miss covering high school sports now, because I see what goes into it. It's not just like what you and I grew up with. It was a totally different atmosphere, and these people that just love it so much. And so it's made me just like be so passionate about what I do, and just be so driven to also do something completely innovative. And I think initially, when I went on this mission to be an independent journalist and leave my local sports career, it was scary, but I knew that, like, this is the future, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, no, 100%. Before we get to your official career, I wanted to ask you, because I know you went to Oregon, so I wanted to see what your experience was like there. I know you got to be a cheerleader there, and kind of how did you transition after Oregon to be in journalism, broadcasting, all that stuff?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it was wild. I got so lucky, definitely. Going to the University of Oregon was like the best decision I ever made in my life. Mind you, it wasn't really a decision. I always wanted to go to UCLA. I thought that was, my destiny. I always grew up thinking that I was going to go there, and I didn't get in. And I was just heartbroken. I thought like my life was over, and it ended up being the best thing in the world. Especially because, I got to cheer in 3 BCS bowl games while I was there. It was just so wild. I got to cheer in a national championship. When we played Auburn, Cam Newton was there. I gave him, a stink eye before he walked off the field, even though we lost. It was just like the magical moments that I've been able to experience have just been unbelievable. And you don't really embrace them, as I'm sure like you feel like, until your career is over. and you're like, wow, like I did some really cool things. That was pretty amazing. Like, and nobody else gets to experience that. Like nobody else is me. Nobody else is Bridget Case who got to experience that moment right now. And I really wish that I had, I guess, not taken that for granted as much during my time there. But what's really special to me is that a lot of my college friends, a lot of my friends who played football, like we're all still really close. And, you know, they've been so supportive. Like when I first launched my first podcast, and we had this just really cool camaraderie of just what it means to be a Duck. There's just this special bond. I don't know. Like, I mean, you know, the Pac-12 is crazy, but it's Eugene is the most magical place in the world. I tell everyone, I'm like, just go there. And it's so cool. It was so awesome. But I was really disappointed in myself that I didn't focus enough on what my life looked like after college and what my life would look like after NFL cheerleading. Like I really wish that I invested more in myself because like, you know, you don't really have time for an internship. You've got like a couple weeks during the summer that you have off, and then you've got to be back to get ready for football season. And so, you know, you can't do a 10-week internship like every other student, but I wish that I had been more confident and approached a local station and just said, hey, like I'm a student athlete. Can I come and shadow you for a couple weeks? So when anybody who is a student athlete comes and asks me for advice, you know, what should I do right now? Like, what can I do to get ahead? That's always my first thing is, don't worry about the rules. Even if it says you need 10 weeks to be an intern, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? Screw it. You just need to go and approach, show your face. And once they meet you, 100%, they're going to just say like, you know, let's find something for you to just get your foot in the door, get your feet wet.
Right.
So that was like the biggest mistake that I ever made. Of course, I still got a little bit of experience. I made a lot of connections. I was always the first person, like when, during baseball season, when like Oregon's program when I was there was really new, and obviously like spring was super, like nothing was going on for me. We just like trained during spring, and so I would go to all the baseball games, and I always made sure when we had like when there were national, you know, broadcasters in town and ESPN was in town, I always hit him up on Twitter, and I would just be like, hey, can I come and hang out with you in the booth? Like whatever. I would just hit him up, and totally I'd pull the Oregon cheerleader card. I'm like, can the Oregon cheerleaders come hang out? Meaning just me. But,
Yeah.
you know, I would totally do that. You know, sometimes it backfired, but usually it went, you know, it went my way. And I ended up making like one of the greatest mentor relationships of my life. When I hit up Adam Amin,
Oh
one
yeah,
time.
he just left ESPN, right? I think.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
yeah, his contract was up this month. And he was really early in his career. I think it was like he was in his like first year at ESPN. And he was one of the youngest hires ever at ESPN. And he just took me under his wing, and we just like, oh my gosh, he's such a fantastic person, and like, you know, really showed me the ropes. And I think for me that made me realize like, wow, like I really can stand up for myself here and say like, hey, I'm awesome, and I should totally use my clout and you know, get my foot in the door. And I wish that I learned that earlier. I tell everybody that, but yeah,
Yeah, it
that's
sounds
kind
like
of, that
you
was my number one
knew.
strategy.
Yeah, it sounds like
Kind of, not
you were in
really.
college though. At least, I mean, how many kids are reaching out to people on Twitter to not just to get on TV, but you're like trying to be in it.
Yeah, but then, like, I'm not going to name names, but then, you know,
Right.
what sucks is then when you do end up, like, it works out, you go and you meet them and you hang out during the game, you shadow, and then it ends up being like, oh, well, they just want to, like, hook up with you.
Yeah.
That
Well, I
sucks.
mean,
That's
when you're,
some real industry, like,
yeah, no,
stuff I'm giving you right
I
there.
100% believe that. And it sucks that it's like that. And you're actually like trying to get a job and get, you know, some experience, but
Yeah, like
unfortunately,
think about it. When you're a
yeah.
college girl and some old guy like does that, like how that makes you feel horrible.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. But at least you got some experience, and that's good. At
Yeah.
least you found, one mentor. But I wanted to ask you about your first gig. So you leave Oregon and you get into your journalism career. And I think I saw your first job was in Palm Springs covering high school football. And I can't imagine how much is going on there.
Oh my God. Well, I always tell people this. I will never go to Coachella because I've seen too many dead bodies in Indio.
Man.
So, because I covered both sports and news. That was my start, was, basically like I would go out to SWAT team standoffs or whatever crazy stuff was going on in the middle of the night. That was my job. Besides Friday nights and being out on the fields, otherwise I was like just out there covering crime. But it was so fun. It basically started because I was wrapping up my contract with the Chargers at the time. So I was living in San Diego, and then I was just trying to get an internship anywhere I could. And this comes back to me being so bummed out that I didn't take advantage of any opportunity while I was in college. Excuse me. But anyway, so I emailed like 40 to 50 different places, different stations throughout Southern California, about internship programs, about production assistant jobs. Most people didn't get back to me. I met with a ton of people that I knew in the industry. Like, oh my gosh, it was just, it was just draining. I was getting, rejection after rejection, mostly because they were like, you have to be a student. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to lie and say that I'm in grad school. So I applied for an internship in Palm Springs at NBC and said I was in grad school. All of a sudden, I get a phone call, I get an interview, I get accepted, and they're like, we need to see your transcripts. And I'm like, oh shoot, well, I gotta apply to grad school, and so that's what ended up happening. I ended up, I think I had some old transcripts because I used to do summer school online through Saddleback. And so I think I don't remember what I used. I used something from there. But so I basically fudged my way with that. But I ended up actually going back to school anyway and getting my master's at USC. But what I did was I had this internship for a month. I would drive over the mountain. It's about a 2.5-hour drive from San Diego to Palm Springs. And it's a crazy, crazy drive. And so I would make that commute and I would work the morning show really, really early. And then I would drive back and then I'd have practice for a few hours at night. And then I'd drive back in the middle of the night. I'd sleep on the couch a little bit at work. And we had some family friends who had homes out in the desert. So I'd crash at whoever's home was available. Wow. And I made that commute for a long time. So after a month was up, then a production assistant job opened up. So then I was really good at cameras and audio. So I ended up getting that job. Then all of a sudden, a month later, the Friday night football reporter, he leaves for a job in Ohio. And I had been just getting on the desk. I was so bad. I was so horrible. I need to get out some of my earliest tapes because oh my gosh, it just makes me cringe. I can't believe they ever put me on TV. And so the main anchor went to bat for me and he just said, this girl, she works hard and, she wants this bad. She knows what she's talking about. Just give her a shot. And so they did. And yeah, I kind of fell flat on my face a few times, but I just kept going and kept trying. And I was there for a year and it was awesome. I got to, get my feet wet covering high school sports and I realized how much I loved it. And that was my in. And I made that crazy commute for a year and it was wild. I really wish I never left that job. That's the one thing I will say, because after that, I ended up leaving for a host and producer job with a professional tennis team. And of course, again, it was a great learning experience, but yeah, I always tell anybody, just do what you got to do to get your foot in the door. Obviously don't almost fall asleep at the wheel. That happened to me quite a few times. So there are safer ways to do that, but it's a grind. You got to be dedicated to get into the industry.
Right. And it's just a general question, because you're obviously on the inside of both, on TV and reporting. Is it a big jump? Is that a big deal to go from being a reporter to being an anchor on TV? Is that a huge jump? Do people view it that way in the industry?
In the industry, yeah, definitely. Because your roles kind of differ, but you definitely need experience out in the field before you jump on the anchor desk. Just because as an anchor, you have to be so flexible and you have to be able to really run a show. And so I'm so glad that I had, field experience before I got on the anchor desk years later. But I love being on the desk. And I always thought I did not want to be on the desk. But then when I ended up signing with an agent, a couple years in, he was like, "You're way better in the studio and on the desk." And I was like, "Oh no, like I want to be on sidelines. Like, no, that's my thing, and then I just kept watching tape of myself and I was like, yeah, I am, this is more my thing. I love just chatting and I seem so much more real and it's much more similar to what I'm able to do now. Um, and I think that was something that was hard for me to kind of admit because at first it made me feel like, am I a failure? Because I always told myself, well, Bridget's going to be a sideline reporter, and it's like I remember a stupid article, I think it was like busted coverage or something so dumb, like one of those really dumb websites that came out during college and it was like, Bridget Case, is she going to be the next Erin Andrews? It was so stupid. And
Hey,
so
that's good though. That's a huge compliment.
Well, but they do that with a lot of people.
Right.
But like they do it with everybody. And I remember like at that time, like when I was in college, I'm like, yeah, I have to do this, and this because, I only want to be a sideline reporter and I only want this. But once I realized where my skill set was, and how much I loved, I guess, just storytelling and how my interaction with people differed and how just like my voice is so different than somebody else out there. I really saw the value in myself in studio. And it was almost like I was undervaluing myself and I didn't think that I deserved to be an anchor. And I think that that's what's cool about what I do now because I'm able to do that. And I very much now do value myself, which is kind of ironic.
As far as your cheerleading career, like what were your days like, being with the Chargers? What was it like being an NFL cheerleader compared to college in that way?
College was definitely a lot more fun. The NFL is a lot more serious. It's definitely a job. Of course, college is hard in the sense that you're balancing school and you're balancing your practice schedule and games and travel and all that. So, obviously it's a little different when you're in the NFL, but I think the hardest part was just definitely feeling like you are part of the organization, but you often do feel a little bit undervalued. I felt appreciated, but you put in so much time and effort that you want to be, I don't know how to say this, like I always feel like I get myself in hot water whenever I like talk about this, but here's the thing, I have a hard time with people who go around talking bad about, their experiences as an NFL cheerleader when it gave them so much and it gave them a platform. I don't think it's right that we don't get paid enough. I will 100% say that. I don't think a lot of things that go on in the inside world are right in the sense that like I hated getting weighed once a week. I understand it, but I think there are different ways to go about it. Like I hated going in and being told, I needed to lean out my legs. And just like there's so much pressure that goes beyond your talent level. And it's just sad in that sense, but I wouldn't be here without my experience. I'm so grateful to that. And it was, again, like even for all the hardships that I experienced during that time, I wouldn't change it for the world because I developed into the woman that I am today. I'm so much stronger for it. And I had some of the most incredible times in my life. I got to go travel to France and, perform there. It was so cool. There are just awesome things that I would never have been able to do and amazing people that I've met. And you get a front row seat to some of the most incredible shows on the field in the world. And just watching people like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or Phillip Rivers walk right in front of you is just so epic. it's incredible. And so when I think back on all of that, I always say, wow, like there really is so much positive that came from that. But it's definitely a grind. You know, people see all the glitz and glamour and think it's easy, and it's so not that way. Especially because so many people look at you and judge you in a certain way. Especially a lot of women. I have a really hard time with women who judge other women. I always say, you know, women need to support each other. It drives me insane when, you know, we can't do that. So I wouldn't have changed it for the world. It was really incredible. And I mean, it gave me my platform. But I will tell you, like, initially, when I was first starting out as a journalist, I didn't want to talk about my career because I felt judged, especially working in a lot of different smaller communities. I didn't want people to know because I also wanted to make it as a reporter on my own and by my talent, and not because of something I did.
Yeah. No, I get that. You
Yeah,
wanted to
you
make
know.
it because you were good at your job, not because
Exactly.
you had that background.
Right. You get it.
Definitely. But it also gave you the opportunity. I wanted to ask you about Turbo Talk, which is the show you host with Robert Turbin. How did you guys come together? And he's a former NFL, or is he still playing the NFL? Or
yeah, but he's a free agent right now.
Okay, got it. How did you two come together to form a show?
Yeah, so funny story. We met through a mutual friend, and he came on my podcast, and we had a really great episode. It was actually really funny because, I mean, I had a fantastic time on my end, but apparently he just had the most, you know, incredible, magical experience on his end, and I could barely hear him. It was just so funny because the way he tells the story, I'm always like, do you know that your service was so bad I could barely hear you? Like, it's so funny. But anyway, it's we had an awesome conversation, and we were just chatting after and talking about how we were both going to be at Super Bowl, and you know, we really hit it off, and we just decided that we were going to meet up. And he wanted to learn more about podcasts, and because he was going to be starting his own show. So of course I said, you know, definitely I'd love to offer you my help, and in any way that I can. So when we got out to Super Bowl, we decided to meet up, and he was going to come out and do another episode with me, and he was late. So what ended up happening was I was just like, you know what, screw it. Why don't you come and co-host this episode with me? And so he co-hosted an episode that I did with these two women who they have a sports and entertainment marketing firm. They're actually Madonna's former executive assistants. They're really interesting.
That's pretty cool.
And it was really cool. They couldn't talk about that much because they have like crazy NDAs, but still, it's just cool.
Yeah.
So he just came in and like we killed it. Like, we just had great chemistry. We had never met in person before, and we just realized that, like, wow, we've got something here. And we just stuck together for the rest of the week. We were kind of inseparable ever since. And then we recorded our first show on Radio Row later that week, and thought it was just going to be temporary. Thought that I was just on that episode with him as like a temporary co-host, but it ended up going really well. And he just decided, he was like, you know, I want this podcast to be good. Why don't we see how it goes? And so, yeah, the rest is history. I don't know if that makes any sense because I don't know where it's going, but you know, that's kind of the beauty of it.
Yeah, 100%. I saw you guys had Felix Hernandez on the other day. How was that interview?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if you were able to watch it at all. He's so funny. He was hilarious. I mean, like, I've watched interviews like with him for years, but like just talking to him was just,
oh my God, funny.
He's freaking hilarious.
Yeah.
He was, oh my God, especially like, I know I posted this on my Instagram, but when I asked him how he learned English, and he was like, Jack in the Box number, and I was like, what's your first word? He's like, number 7. And oh my gosh, I was just dying. And he was hilarious. He was so funny. And just such a real guy. And you know, it was just really cool to see somebody like King Felix, such an icon in the baseball world, come to life.
Yeah.
And be so real, because I mean, you know, some of these guys get such big heads once they make it to the big leagues, and it's really sad to see that. And I hate that, and I don't want to be any part of that and fuel that. And so to see somebody like him really be so down to earth is just so cool. And it makes me realize like there's no excuse to get a big head and to big league your friends. Don't do it. If anybody's listening.
No, 100%. You definitely shouldn't do that. And especially for him, like some of the Latin players, like it, there's to learn the culture here, and it's tough. As long as they're willing to learn English and be part of it, they can be, as just great with everybody. So I'm glad he's been the man in Seattle for years. So it's
totally
cool like
I know. And I mean, like I'm super curious. I know there's been a lot of back and forth whether he was gonna make the Braves roster or not. So I mean, we'll see, but it'll be interesting to see how he does in another market.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to finally ask you about, or not finally, I got more questions, but I wanted to ask you about your show, After Orange Slices. How'd you decide on the name, and kind of what is your, goal for the show?
Yeah, so I came up with the name because, like anybody, when you're playing sports as a kid, you always think about the team mom who has snacks at the end of the game. You're ready for your Capri Sun or your Gushers, whatever it may be, whatever processed 90s snack that it is. Yep. But then there's always orange slices, something like that you have and you enjoy when you're done. And so for me, I first started my show as this platform for athletes to tell their story, transitioning into life after sports, the loss of identity, dealing with drug and alcohol addiction, financial issues, whatever it may be. And then it expanded into more talking about, the more than an athlete, the athlete and mission. So really just talking about like off the field, off the court, after orange slices, like after you ate your orange slices. And that's kind of where it came from. And a lot of people can relate to that.
100%. And I tell people this all the time. Like, I played in the minors for 7 years, but I spent that much time not building a working life resume.
Exactly. So, I think you and I talked about that a little bit. I don't know if we did, but a little bit, like, because that's the most tragic part about anybody who's played in the minor league system for so long is that no players are taught the skills of how to convert all that you've learned as a leader playing on a team for so long and put it on paper, put it on a resume. It's oh my gosh, I'm dumbfounded every time that I learn that. And I wish that more systems, more organizations would prepare their athletes, for that. And especially like looking at, what was it last week, how many minor league players were let go? Yeah. How many of them are prepared now? Especially since we're dealing with COVID, it's gonna be so hard for people to go and get jobs. Of course, I know some people are already prepared because lots of guys have to work, have to work jobs during the off season anyway. Right. But yeah, it's scary, and you really have to be gritty and and you have to humble yourself because, like when you're in college, especially, a lot of times, and not everybody, but sometimes it's easy to get a big head, and you're a big man on campus, and you don't realize until you're playing in the minor leagues and you're in the armpits of the United States, and you're like, wow, I'm really not as big of a deal as I thought I was. And it's hard. I wish more schools, I wish more organizations would prepare people for life after sports. The best class that I ever took in college was a 1-credit course, and it was my senior year. And it was like a 1 hour, one day a week. So barely a course. I think I just took it. I don't know why I took it. It was something elective, whatever. Yeah. And it was the most valuable class I ever took in my life because all we did was focus on resumes, cover letters, and just approaching people, like networking. It was, oh my God, so valuable. I still format my resumes the same way to this day. I wish we had more classes like that. I wish we had more money management classes. I think we just learn too much of the bullshit that we don't need to use in everyday life.
Right. 100%. I totally agree with you. I wish we were more prepared leaving school. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. I saw you posted something the other day about how, I guess your trainer or something said something about females in sports and they don't know what they're talking about. It's a big sticking point. So of course, since I have you on and you're in the sports world, I wanted to ask you about it. How do you feel about where we are in the female sports world?
I mean, I definitely think that we can be a lot further, but I will say that I'm very happy that I've faced the challenges that I have faced, because it has made me strong and it's given me the confidence to become the person that I am today and become a mentor to other people, become a good mentee, learn from others. I was not that confident early on, and I've gained a ton of confidence. I've learned to love myself. Like, I look at myself in the mirror every single day and I'm like, you're awesome. You're beautiful. And why can't we tell ourselves that? Like, women, I wish we were more okay with, complimenting each other and not worrying about being vain or being conceited. It's just so ridiculous. But I think we worry about all that stuff so much because we are so concerned with how males judge us. And guys guys take advantage of that. Not everybody, but that's just kind of been the norm for so many years. And sadly, that carries into the sports industry or any male dominated industry. But for me, I love experiencing that because it's a challenge. And so for me to dominate a challenge makes me feel like I'm winning and I'm doing something right in the world. Anytime I get a DM or like an email from somebody who saw a post or listened to a podcast episode, and they say something like, they're like, oh my gosh, this was so positive and empowering, or you helped me come out to my parents, you helped me seek out somebody for therapy. That makes my day. If I can help just one person in the world, that to me, like, I've accomplished everything. Like, that is just my mission. And it just makes me feel amazing. I mean, I know that, like, you saw the post, but really what happened with my trainer was that he went on to say that, basically he thinks that women don't know anything about sports, and he said it in a very vulgar way.
Right.
And I, of course, went off on him, and he did not have his facts right. And I was kind of glad that that happened, because it reminded me that a lot of people are still set in this 1950s housewife mindset and don't realize where we are today. And, of course, we have a long way to go. But like I said, I love that challenge. And I feel like it's made me into the powerful woman that I am today. Of course, I have a ton of things to work on. I'm not perfect, but it put this fire under my butt to just work harder. And I think, not that I was getting lazy at the time, but that was in December, and it pushed me. I was like, okay, really? You still think that? Then I'm going to go out and kill it and prove you wrong. So.
Damn, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask, is this going to be your full-time thing for podcasting? Are you still trying to get back on TV or journalism, or what else is once we get back to normal here?
Yeah. So, I mean, I still consider myself a full-time journalist. We are working on a Twitch partnership right now. Everything's in the works, but because we're doing a live daily show, it's actually Monday through Thursday for Turbo Talk Live. So we're kind of fiddling around with the format of that, and seeing where that goes. So depending on where that goes, I might stick with that for a while, because it's been really really fun. We have some really great guests coming up in the next few weeks who I don't want to, I shouldn't name just in case, because
you don't have to.
Well, because it's like people cancel, and then
right.
you just don't know. But it's funny. Like, I've just been getting awesome interviews and having great conversations, and I wouldn't want to change that for the world. So who knows what things will look like after COVID, but the media landscape is changing, and I know that the digital platform is the future, and that's all I can say from here. Who knows where I'll be in a few months.
That's all right. Nobody knows, right?
Yeah.
So where can everybody find you if they want to listen to your show or check you out online and stuff?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at After Orange Slices. I'm really active on there. Feel free to DM me. And you can, of course, find my podcast, After Orange Slices, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Same with Turbo Talk, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And watch our live show on Twitch. I'm working on streaming it through my channel, which is twitch.tv/Bridget Case. But right now you can go to twitch.tv/Robert J. Turbin. So either of us, you can stream it through. So yeah, and I'm on Twitter too. I'm just not as active there. So Bridget Case _.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, I'll tell you, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. A lot of great insight, and hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. Thank you.